Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCG live codes, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. For today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the results of the North American International Championships, the largest tournament on the calendar and the final chance for a number of players to acquire those points required for the World Championships, which will be a different format as well, actually. So this is the standalone tournament in Destined Rivals. Now, I do still think these decks and lists will be the stepping stones toward the World Championships. We'll be testing against a number of the most successful lists that we'll look at later, heading into the World Championships and sort of reacting to the successes of these deck lists, but also bear in mind that heading into Worlds, there's also the Black Bolt and White Flare cards. And actually, you can check the link in the description for the community ratings for these cards. Lots of interesting stuff coming out in these expansions, new potential archetypes, as well as adapting cards going into archetypes as well. So you can check it all out at PokemonProxies.com. I'll leave a link to that in the description below as well, so you can get acclimated with the cards coming out in time for the World Championships. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we want to talk about how things played out heading into Destined Rivals. There was a lot of hype around the Grimmsnarl archetype. That certainly did show up. It was actually the third most popular and most played archetype. If you combine the Grimmsnarl variants, 12.43%. Dragapult was still the most played when you combine the variants, where it was just above that 16% threshold. And we'll look at the variants in a moment, but it was split mostly between the Dragazards and the Dragadustnoirs, with much less play on the straight Dragapult builds. Then Raging Bolt was also above that 16% as well, so a very played archetype there as the most played aggressive deck in the room. Gardevoir still maintained above 10%, and this was the strange deck with its target on its back, right? It's just won a huge number of majors in the Journey Together format. It was expected to be the best deck in format, but then there was the question mark of Marnie's Grimmsnarl, which really took the masses away from the deck, but it still maintained a good amount of play because it has so much historic play and reasons to like the deck inherently. Didn't really change much from the new expansion outside of this new matchup that if you learn how to navigate, you could still have a good time. And of course, Grimmsnarl still only 12% of the field. You can still take all the benefits of Gardevoir previously and still rock this archetype. Outside of that, it was Joltik Box, then Golden Go, followed up by Flareon. This was an interesting metagame placement, the Flareon deck, where you had to fear the Watchtower, but gained the fact that Leafeon could come into the deck list and gave you a really good free Grimmsnarl matchup. Don't want to say free because it's still close, but the Leafeon was getting more and more well placed, I think, with more Dragapult builds tending towards Charizard, and Marnie's Grimmsnarl being a new good matchup for you, thanks to your grass type coverage. So that was an interesting one. Cynthia's Garchomp showed up at 2%, which is a bit of a surprise to me, actually. A little bit more than I expected, and actually some high-profile players decided to go with the Garchomp, so we'll look at some of those deck lists. Ethan's Typhlosion, another new one, Rocket's Mewtwo, so some of the new stuff, you know, Grimmsnarl performed, well, was played quite heavily, but there was also some intrigue for some of the new archetypes as well. The Rocket's Mewtwo getting that 1.5%, Typhlosion getting almost 2% in play rate as well. Let's ungroup these to have a bit of a fairer reflection then. There was more Dragapult Golden Go than straight Golden Go. There was more Dustoir than Charizard, although it's a pretty even split between the two. And yeah, some Roaring Moon, a small contingent of Toedscruel, almost 1% of players, obviously, that had Ray Chen with a decent performance in Portland with the deck. And yeah, maybe a smuttering of, you know, Ho-Oh, Armarouge, Charizard Pidgeot. Yeah, Mega, another new deck on the block. Zoroark was previously a contender, but with the fear factor of Darmanitan being blocked by Shaman, that was one of the big selling points of the deck. So that kind of went away a little bit to the expected. I'm a little surprised at how few Archaladon picked up in play, honestly, because there was a new build with Venture Bomb and Monkey Dory, which was really popular in Japan, but not really picked up by the masses. Terrabox also, you know, with Shaman coming out, that's one of the big issues of the deck, and it was very vulnerable to Watchtower, so new things in Destined Rivals made this deck less likely to see some play. But those are really the main decks picking up in that sort of day one meta percentage. Raging Bolt out in front, a number of the stage 2s sort of fighting it out. Again, combine the Dragapult, and that's still the most played archetype, only just. So bear that in mind. But yeah, Bolt, Joltik, the aggressive basics, Guardy, Dragapult, Grimmsnarl fighting out as the stage 2s, Flareon and Golden Go for the most part being the stage 1s as the best contenders in the format right now. Let's quickly look at the conversion for decks to see how well they went from day 1 to day 2. Now, this is always somewhat of a metric for how good of a play a deck was, and of course the more popularity you have, you know, against certain decks or alongside certain decks, it's less likely to have that strong conversion, but really it's trying to see like what the play truly was. And we see Gardevoir, it won the tournament and had a 14% overall day 1 to day 2. Dragazard, the best of the Draga builds, with a 16.8%. Straight Pult still having a pretty decent tournament overall. And then it's always way less empirical data when there's just far less players playing it, but Toadscroll seem to have overall a pretty generally strong tournament. Those are like the standouts, I think, from day 1 to day 2 conversion, to see just how good they all were. Joltik Box being one of the big losers of the top contenders, so too was the Golden Go Dragapult. These were some of the higher profile, more played archetypes that had really stinky days, honestly, and didn't do that well for the masses deciding to pilot it. So maybe a bit of overhype alongside those sorts of builds to bear in mind. But the day 2 was still Raging Bot on top, followed by Gardevoir, then Grimmsnarl. So Gardy did leapfrog the Grim, if I recall correctly. Yes, it did. Followed up by some of the Pult builds. They had a pretty decent time of things, to be honest with you. Flareon, Joltik Box with that big dip, and then we have the other Dragapult variant sneaking in there as well for the overall play rates. Now let's have a look at some of the standings overall then. And it was a 15-person asymmetrical top cut. Really interesting that 3 Gardevoirs made it into Asym, and they all made it into the top 4. So Gardevoir had still an insane showing. I don't think many people touted Gardevoir to be the eventual winning deck for this tournament, with the big question mark over Grimmsnarl as the new high-profile bad matchup. And if we take a look at the matchups generally, how do I go for this? Yeah, here we go. If we find Gardevoir generally, we can see that the Grimmsnarl matchup truly is an awkward one. If we go for the the day 1 win percentage of Guardy into Grim was 32%, but even when you put the day 2 filter on, this is Gardevoir more likely being played at a high level, only got to that roughly 40%. So a 40-60 into a new high profile bad matchup. Undoubtedly a concern. Equally, Dragazard just at that 42% as well, whereas previously you would happily see those Dragapults. You can see that you're the 60% into the Straight Pult and the Draga Dusk, so seeing some proportion of the Dragapults now tending towards Charizard, making that matchup worse for you. Metagaming-wise, it's still tough to be playing Gardevoir, but I think this is more of a testament to the pilots of the Gardevoir, how strong players they were, but also some of the deck lists that we'll get into as well. For the rest of the sort of high-level overview, there was still a lot of Dragapult success. There was 3 Dragazards, although none of them made it into the eventual top 8. There were 2 Dragapult Dusknoirs, although none of them made it into the eventual top 8. And then 2 straight Dragapults, one making it to top 4 with Tord Reklev. And then Roche did play a 1-1 line of the Dusclops, so kind of a sort of halfway house between the two, to be honest with you. You could almost call this a win for the Curse Blasters. You could call this a win for the Straight Pults, depending on how you want to look at it. So Dragapult was still littering that eventual asymmetrical cut, having a really great showing. Grimmsnarl only made 1 placement in the eventual Asym, and it was by Piper Lapine, a really well-known, respected player for a number of seasons now. So overall, could you say Grimmsnarl was a flop? Well, not necessarily, because it did get that top 8 placement and still had good overall day 1 to 2 conversion, or at least respectable. So I don't think we call Grimmsnarl like a flop overall. I just think if we look at the matchups for Grimmsnarl, what was really holding it back in this tournament? I'll put the day 2 filter on once again for a sort of higher level overview. Some of the worst matchups, well, a really bad Joltik Box seemed to be one of the things holding back this deck, which is somewhat of a surprise, although if we put the day 1 filter on with more matchup data, yeah, it's still roughly a 40-60 in favour of that Joltik. The Raging Bolt being more difficult as well in that day 1, so again, higher performing lists seem to have a better time into the Raging Bolt, almost like a 50-50, once it got down to like the strong pilots of Grimmsnarl. What else is there overall? Flareon being slightly awkward. Nothing too dangerous, honestly. This is looking like really promising percentages, honestly, with it being still favoured into the Guardy, still favoured into the Dragazard and Dragadusk. I feel like Grimmsnarl certainly isn't a flop and is definitely like a really strong deck and probably worthy of being in that sort of top 3 or 4 popularity overall. And will continue to fight those other stage 2s because guess what? All the other stage 2s still did well in the tournament. So I think Grimmsnarl continues to be a big threat in the metagame. The standout surprises of the top cut, certainly seeing an N Zoroark from Cameron Shinoy, an interesting build as well. A Toadscroll from Raychen once again making bank off of their Toadscroll archetype, which is nuts. Just 1 Raging Bolt in there. and one also making 16th as well, so just missing out on the cut, but overall not too shabby. And then also there was one Flareon from Nathan Ginsberg. So let's go from top to bottom going through the archetypes. Let's start with Bradner, and huge congratulations for his first Masters International win. This season we've seen him become a regional and international champion, and of course this is the largest tournament to date. Might be smashed in the future, but for now, Isaiah can say that he is the winner of the largest tournament in the Western world for the Pokemon TCG, which is absolutely nuts. And it was with Gardevoir, and a pretty unique build actually, where you can see you've really stripped down the attacking options. There's no Drifloon in the deck, there's only one copy of the Bravery Charm in here, and instead it's leaning really heavily into good old Monkey Dory. 4 Darkness Energy, 4 Monkey Dory, 1 TM Turbo Energize as well. This is another Arven option, and a Secret Box option in the deck alongside TM Evolution. So there's 2 Evo, 2 Candy. So you can, in certain hands, go for the double Curlier approach and just say that I'm eventually going to find a Gardevoir even against aggressive decks. Or if your hand allows it, you can sometimes go for the TM Turbo Energize instead and try and get energy on multiple Monkey Dory so that you have Adrenabrain online as quickly as possible. Gardevoir is still one of the best users of Monkey Dory, I think, alongside Grimmsnarl, mostly because they generate their own damage, right? Grimmsnarl does it with Frostlass, Gardevoir does it from its own Psychic Embrace. And at the same time, you can actually attack with Monkey Dory in this deck as well, so it can provide early pressure as a poking mon if you really need to. So the Turbo Energize just means you have more monkeys set up earlier on in the game, which means you can control the opponent's board much more dangerously. And I think the denial of certain cards like Snorunt or Frostlass, if your opponent is able to get it out into play, is a really big factor here. So the Grimmsnarl isn't at full power. And I think that's what gives you the control, really. If you're the one still dictating the situations with Adrenabrain at your disposal, you're still going to have a decent time. Yes, you may lack that sort of burst potential from a late game Drifloon, but we've seen many times over that Drifloon isn't a necessity in the deck and is just like a closing option. And Isaiah saying that by the time I've got 3 or 4 Monkey Dory online, even things like Miracle Force or Full Moon Rondo should be enough for me to close games anyway, because I'll have enough damage to fling around as I choose. But it's still a Secret Box build, still very reminiscent of Henry's old build, right? With the 2 Night Stretcher, 1 Rod combination. It did also choose to go down to 1 Countercatcher and add 1 Boss's Orders. Bit of a trade-off here, because you have a bit less easy control when you're behind on prizes with only access to 1 Countercatcher, an awkward prized card for sure. But the Boss's Orders means that even under Shaman, you can have a gusting effect to take your final 2 prize cards, even if the opponent is level on prizes for you. So this is more of a nod towards the fact that Screamtail isn't the same catch-all that it used to be, but at the same merits, with enough Monkey Dory in play, you can still target down a Shaman all in a turn and still get your Roaring Stream off. So I think 1 boss is plenty here, honestly. And when it's eating into the Countercatcher count anyway, it's not that big of a deal. So again, that same shell that we've seen repeated over and over again from Henry, now brought together with Isaiah to go even more monkey focused than ever. It protects you around Devo plays, it gives you more bench control earlier on in the game, which I think is crucial, so that you can be the one dictating that Monkey Dory war into Grimmsnarl, which is the main issue of Grimmsnarl. Like, sure, Gardevoir has to be concerned with Grimm taking KOs on Gardevoir, but that was the same thing for Charizard this whole time, and you've just about managed that through other means. So I think the fact that you can just stay on top of monkeys is still like the critical element of the deck. So it's a really cool innovation to see that Energize coming into the deck list, even with just 1 box double Arven. Like, we're not fully committing to this route, but having it within the deck gives you just a bit more flexibility into what is otherwise a pretty awkward matchup. And I think Isaiah, actually, if we look at his list specifically, he beats a lot of Grimmsnarl. He beat 4 Grimmsnarl throughout the tournament. Obviously, he only took 1 loss throughout the entire weekend, so he's been beating everything. But what really stands out is it's not like he got lucky and dodged the Grimm, and just because Guardy's good it got there. No, he beat 4 Grimmsnarl, including some really strong players like Piper, Ian as well. So, like, when you're facing some of the best pilots of what's meant to be a bad matchup, it proves that this build works, and that Isaiah and his testing group figured out the way to beat what is otherwise an awkward matchup. So definitely got to get back to testing Gardevoir. If Grimmsnarl's not even a good matchup anymore, then this deck just has to be still a shoo-in as one of the top picks towards the World Championships. Riley in second place, congrats to them as well. With a different approach of Gardevoir, the more traditional build with the heavy TM Evo within the deck list, and just saying that let me get into Gardevoir, that's still the best policy. It is still quite thick on the monkey package, you know, the 3 Dark, 3 Monkey Dory. It does have Drifloon and Screamtail with the Bravery Charm option. It has the Shaman coming into the deck list, which can protect you against some spread attacking options, and it does have the Budu to slow down opponents as well. But this is like a fairly unchanged build from the old Chao successors. Essentially just adding in the Shaman is really all it is. So yeah, sticking to what we know with Gardevoir, still ended up having a decent time of things. And let's also end up on Greg's top 4 list as well. Sort of in between, this is much more similar to a Brent Tonneson style build where it has Cleffa and Budu in the deck. It's high on the candy count rather than having any Arven or TM Evo here. It just has Box for Bravery Charm and just playing the 2 crucial supporters. So the other Gardevoirs that did well didn't even include the boss's orders. They said that they can just monkey down Shamans and still get Screamtail off, or they find their prize map to go more aggressively into the active position that little bit more often. And I suppose to an extent Drifloon helps in that regard. So that's the Gardevoirs all doing well. I think the main intrigue is that Bradner did really well into the Grimmsnarl, so we have to be testing that new build. Let's have a look at some of the Dragapult then. And it was actually a straight Dragapult from Tord Reklev in that top 4 position. And this actually makes me warm and fuzzy inside. Tord has gone back to his roots. Back when he was winning ICs for fun, he would rock up with the highest counts of cards in his deck, saying that he's the best player in the world and all he needs to do is set up into games and give himself that opportunity to play the game. If he can do that, he can find his win conditions just through his own play. And I think he struck a really great balance here of just saying, let's play 4 of all the good cards. 4 Research, 4 Iono, 4 Boss's Orders, 4 Buddy, 4 Ultra, so you just get into games alongside the 3 Brock Scouting. So you have a ton of early game search, so you're not just going to get donked or brick in the opening stages, you get online early. That gets your engine going. As long as Drakcloak's in play, you're going to be streaming through your deck and seeing a bunch of cards. But then you still have enough power spikes in here. 4 boss means you're in control of what you're taking out with Phantom Dive and making the most of that. You have the 4 Luminous double monkey in the deck as well. Previously, we've seen just 1 monkey in straight Pult. But playing 2 copies means it's, you know, too important to prize the card, so you want to have access to it, especially now with so many other decks using the Monkey Dory. Sometimes just flinging back the damage you've received is really important. And actually, the fact that the A-Spec is Neo Upper Energy gives you a bit more license to float an energy onto a Monkey Dory, which is another really intriguing thing here, rather than Dragapult going for the Unfair Stamp, which we've seen quite frequently in the deck. It's the Neo Upper choice in here, which does give you license to play the Jamming Tower, which is somewhat of a help against Gardevoir to an extent as well, so that you can still get through Charmed Clefairies or Charmed Mews, that sort of thing. And then it has the basic suite of the Blood Moon Lati, double Budu. The Maractus is in the deck as well. Latias definitely makes the Maractus a little bit better because it has that 2 retreat cost otherwise, so now you can pivot into it quite easily. And again, with the amount of Bull Search in the openings that you have, you can get into that Budu very, very cleanly and smoothly. So a very thick count of manual attachments, so you're not whiffing on those in the opening stages, even against Itchy Pollen, because Pollen is in Mirror, Pollen's in Grimmsnarl, Pollen's in Guardy, it's in all sorts of decks. So having an easy means around that and just making sure you're still evolving, still finding your guys, still attaching energy. Just the fundamentals of Pokemon are just so correct in the list that I absolutely love to see it, to be honest with you. It has just enough of like tech, you know, in terms of Maractus being a tech card to help out against aggressive decks that don't play enough switching cards, Jamming Tower helping out against Gardevoir, which is still undoubtedly a difficult matchup, upping the Monkey Dory count to help in, you know, other mirror matches and help against Grimmsnarl. 3 counts catcher 4 boss just means you're dictating so much with the deck. So a lot of cute decisions within the deck list, even though it's a bunch of 4 of. So I'm certain people are going to take this exact 60 and keep testing it for the World Championships. And bear in mind, Hilda is a really good supporter card, especially for Neo Upper Energy. It gives you a supporter means of finding your A-Spec, which is a really big card going into the next expansion. So I expect more Neo Upper Dragapult going into the World Championships, so definitely good to start getting your reps in with such a simplistic and strong list there. Let's jump down to Roche with their top 8 placement of the straight Pults that did still have the 1/1 Dusclops. Very similar, to be honest with you. It has the same sort of basic suite in that we're leaning into that Lati. It does, of course, fit the Blast package, which means you can take out monkeys really easily, which is good, and it means you're behind on prize cards. So we see still the 3 boss, 3 counts catcher, but the Dusclops almost makes you force counts catcher to be live that little bit more frequently, which is really, really strong. Still a high count on the ball search cards. Still a high count on all the support cards, the double Turo as well. So there are a lot of similarities here. I think the big differential is that there are 3 stadium cards within this deck list, and 2 of them are the Team Rocket's Watchtower, adding that disruptive element, shutting down colourless abilities. It has anti-synergy with your Blood Moon, so you have to be a little bit careful of that option, but there's no doubt that a couple Watchtower within the deck list can still grant you those free wins against Raging Bolt, and can also grant you free wins against Flareon. So it was a card that I played to the tournaments, and I didn't face a single Noctowl throughout the event, but I did still use Watchtower against Blood Moon, which was kind of interesting. But I do still really value this card. It was mostly things like Dragazard adding this in, but I played a secret box build and added in a Watchtower just for the scam potential against those matchups. But yeah, I do think the Watchtower is still a decent option within the deck list, just to essentially buy free wins if you find this card early enough. And when you play for Iono 3 Research and Recon, you see this card pretty frequently, and the combination of Tower, Iono can get you so much back into the game. And it looks like rather than leaning into Maractus, the Watchtower was the approach here that could sometimes flip games in those more awkward matchups like Raging Bot, for example. But again, Neo Upper doing well in both of the straight pults. Really intriguing to see. I'm going to see more of that, actually, as we now get to the Draga Dust Noirs. Again, it's a Neo Upper build, so feels like everyone was singing from the same hymn sheet here and saying that Neo Upper has now like overtaken the option of a mini, like 1 or 2 Arven within the deck list, and then having some amount of tools. So we no longer see Ace Nullifier. We no longer see, well, I guess that was more of a straight pult thing anyway, but we're not seeing the like rescue board into Budgie shenanigans. Everyone is just going for the Lati approach and just saying, let me get into Budgie that way with my ball search cards. Still really thick on those supporter cards. Yeah, it's a cannulous build that we've seen before. Interesting to see like no luxurious cape or anything like that, but again, quite high count of the energy when you include the Neo Upper. Yeah, it's obviously included the Shaman here as well. For a list that plays Dustomer, it seems to have like taken up as minimal space as possible, which I like to see. So like you're not completely wrecked if you don't get into your blasters. Really nice list there. There's also John's list. Obviously, John having previously really strong results with the deck, with again that thin Dust Noir package. Still has the monkey. Also going for Neo Upper. So big tournament for Neo Upper coming into the list. And again, I think it goes back to the fact that this is a 1 energy attachment, so you can float more energy on monkeys. I think it means against the aggressive decks like Golden Go and Raging Bolt, you have an instant 1 attachment response. Also, to an extent as well, you can surprise opponents with certain board states where they're not expecting it because they're expecting a stamp to come their way. That now you can just go, okay, cool, evolve, Neo Upper, smack, and they weren't, building a board ready for that, thinking that there was all Drakloak with no energy in play, that they would be safe essentially, which is kind of cool. In this instance, John did juggle a really minuscule Arven package with the 1 board, 1 luxurious. I do think Cape is still really good, actually. Definitely against Joltik Box and a few other situations, so I do like the tiny weenie nod of Arven. But I think we're getting to that state in the meta where there's just so much pollen that you have to really play other supporter cards. And we're seeing that from all the top performing lists. That's our 2 Draga Dusk. Let's have a look at some of the Dragazards then. Ryan bringing in, still with a stamp in this instance, does have the Jamming Tower in addition to the Zard package here. So a lot of respect being given to the Gardevoir side of things. Has just the 1 TM Evo in the deck list, but still has the Budgie option. So you can build your cloaks, you can build a Charmeleon, or you can just go the defensive Itchy route. So, Cleffer in here, which is a card I do kind of like in the deck, but being sacrificed for pollen that can oftentimes buy you even more time. I like the energy count, looks pretty stable to me. 3 boss, 2 counts catch, it definitely feels like the right counts. Yeah, looking really solid here. Choosing not to play the Shaman, choosing not to play anything like Watchtower, which we saw from the Champions League list. But ultimately, just like no-nonsense counts for the most part here. Looking really good, to be honest with you. Do like that list a lot. And then we also have Makani's list, which is not hugely different, to be honest with you. Is it looking like the same? Looks very similar, if not the exact same. So yeah, I think more of the same with the Dragazards looking good. Final list here, this one weaves in the Chi Yu just as a prize offset option that also hits for weakness into Golden Go and can be a counter catch play against Raging Bolt into Teal Mask. But yeah, looks like everyone was kind of unanimous with their Dragazards, of course. Rowan Stave now also won with it in the little invitational tournament before the NAIC, which also sort of gave a blueprint for a list as well for those who wanted it. Let's now jump back up. Now that we've gone through the Guardies and all the Dragapult builds, let's have a look at Ray's Toadscruel, slightly adapted from their Portland run, but still very similar in its approach. It has Itchy Pollen at its disposal, but it also has the 4 E-switch to get aggressive Myriad Leaf Showers off if you want to initiate a prize race that way. You can also initiate with an Iron Leaves EX as well, of course. Still thick on those Ball Search cards to get into all of your ability guys, just so you get churning through the deck. You have the Area 0, so you can go very wide for Colony Rush to reach on all sorts of Pokemon, some that you may not expect as well. When you have enough Teal Dance, when you have those E-Switch available, that Colony Rush can get some big one-hit KOs, and Slime Colony does block a bunch of things, and the Mycelium Protection still can make a lot of impressive attacks look a lot less impressive when you're denying those effects of attacks. So this was an interesting archetype in that it did well in Portland, and then gained a new good matchup in Grimmsnarl. So let's actually look at the matches here of what we lost to. We lost to a Dragazard. We tied one of the Dragadusks, but ultimately, what an insane run. Beating a Typhlosion? What? What happened? How does that... How? Wow, okay. Well, you can see claiming a couple of those Grimmsnarls as you'd expect, facing a lot of Dragapult as well. Look at that wave of Dragapult. Win, 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 win. The loss and the tie were in there, to be fair, and eventually losing to Tord, but my goodness, like, literally just Mycelium turning Phantom Dive into a 2 for 200 attack is just so sad, right? And you can come out the gate swinging so quickly that you initiate that race and they just don't have the catch-up that they would in other matchups because their attack just isn't that impressive. So another one that, like, going into Worlds, you kind of have to respect because it comes out the gate swinging very frequently, and yeah, it's like kind of consistent at what it does. I know if you check the stream game against Tord, Ray just like completely full bricked, but the deck has so many cards that say draw. I think it actually is pretty difficult to brick with the deck, to be honest with you. Let's have a look at Piper's Grimmsnarl list. Not too different from the list that we saw come out from the Champions League. I think most players cut down from the 4 Impidimps to the 3, knowing that very often you will only get 2 of them set up in the game, and even then you have Super Rod and the Double Stretcher if you really need to go triple Grim in any individual matchup. The Secret Box obviously is going to be the A-spec of choice here. E-Search over Vessel seems kind of fine, just if you're having to box for the E-Search, so you don't have to discard an extra card. The Spike Muff and Artisan split, kind of interesting, because it does feel like you're monkeying off against people. I still kind of lean towards the 2-2, but I do see the reason why you would want 3 Spike Muff, just because it's more neutral, and something that only you're getting benefit from more frequently, rather than giving opponents Artisan for free to get into the game. But overall, this is very similar to what we've seen previously. The 1 Gear is an interesting choice in the deck list, just to give yourself extra reach for certain crucial supporters and as and when you need it. But yeah, it looks like a very streamlined shell of the deck. Again, not too like dissimilar from what we've seen in the past, to be honest with you. There were some other Grimmsnarl pilots that decided to add Pheasantipity into their deck, but the highest placing was from Piper that chose still not to and just had the more difficult prize map for opponents. Cameron Shinoy, like I said when we were going over the lists just briefly, certainly one of the surprises of the tournament, where Darmanitan has sort of lost its big selling point, right? That Flame Body Cannon is so brutal into the evolving decks, and now an easy find Shaman and deny that approach will make you very sad as a Zoroark player, leaving you with just the Virtuous Flame option until they punch into you. But also Backdraft is still really good in the format. Like, don't sleep on that. It's still really good against the Golden Go players. And the fact that you still have a 1-1 line here means that if you sniff out that your opponent hasn't played a Shaman, or if they're just not getting it down in certain instances, you can still make the Darmanitan work, and it can still go your way. But honestly, this is just saying that End Zoroark is really annoying for Grim, for Guardia, of course, through weakness, and through Dragapult. Certainly the Grim and the Dragapult, mostly because they need to punch Zoroark at some point. If you stay level on prizes against those decks, whenever they get the punch, you get the free powerful Rage, and that's a big turn for you. So the fact that you have the Turos, the Rigid Bands that can push you out of range of certain attacks as well, if your opponent's trying to get creative with Monkey Math and all this other stuff, you can make these Zoroark EX tanky enough where there's going to be a point where your opponent has to shrug and trigger the powerful rage for you to have that high damage output play, which is quite powerful, honestly. And you still have a great draw engine at your disposal. I do think that the matchup into Golden Go has to be like significantly worse with a thin Darmanitan. I know you do have the Rigid Band, but still, like, they're going to have the reach on you. The deck, interestingly, doesn't choose to play Budu either. It just plays Cleffa to get into games. It does have Defiance and Black Belt's training for some extra reach into these matchups. It has Power Pad as well, I suppose. But at its core, Zoroark is still just really annoying for the 3 stage 2s. And I think, especially with the TM Devo in the deck, you can still get really creative here. So having a really trimmed down Darmanitan is my intrigue. And I think even with Shaman, if Golden Go is going to be popular enough, if Bolt's going to be popular enough, I would still hedge that a 2-2 is okay. But I do like that we've trimmed it down somewhat. Like, it's definitely worth trimming down from the 3-2 line that we used to have. And also, like, you make a Darumaka, you immediately tax your opponent to find a Shaman on the spot. That's a small thing there, but I suppose if you're mostly doing it through Artisan anyway, then your opponent gets the free Shaman regardless. But yeah, leading into Zoroark and just saying that 170 a turn with Monkey Dory is still good enough when you're buffing yourself up and forcing those powerful rages here and there. Pretty unique to see. Let's see. I mean, beating a good Smorgasbord here. Did manage to beat a couple Raging... Well, a good few Raging Bolt. Getting a couple ties out of them. But still beating... Oh no, getting multiple ties. Okay, so it definitely feels like Darmanitan probably necessary for 3 of the dropped games being into Bolt. Tells me you probably want to have the Darmanitan, right? That feels important. Although, obviously, still taking games. Didn't really face much Pult until later into the tournament, but did manage to beat them. Didn't face a Grimmsnarl either, but was pretty, well prepared for it. So it does, just seeing the triple tie here, and the loss was eventually to a Gardevoir, which is, a good matchup, so I imagine there was either shenanigans afoot or whatever else. But, wow, beating a Mewtwo is impressive as well, because Spidops has to be bad for you. Do you stay out of range of Rocket Rush? No, you don't. Man, that's a really impressive win. Okay, but it does, seeing 3 ties means, all of the dropped games from Cam, bar the Guardian Top Cut, which he would expect to win, were probably because he didn't have a thick enough Darmanitan. And, with 2-2 with Reversal plus your CC is still there, I feel like you are probably taking at least 1 win away from that. But, I mean, it's still tough for Zoroark, ultimately, no matter what. But, yeah, definitely a discussion point of where the list goes, but really creative and bold call to still bring the Zoro when most people were saying that it's fading into obscurity ultimately. But yeah, now let's end on a couple of the Noctowl builds. We'll start with Nathan with the Flareon list. This was one that if I was less afraid of Watchtower, I probably would have played myself, honestly. And again, Nathan with some pretty cool innovation. I think most people landed on this EV splits, the Sylveon being sort of less relevant and the Leafeon being pretty much mandatory within the deck list, and then still having the same shell that we'd seen previously in terms of Pokemon. I do like the Cyrano in here a lot. Pretty much the same item suite that we've seen previously. The one intriguing option is the Gravity Mountain over the Jamming Tower in the list, so that Flareon can push through the Guardy without having to use a Kieran or anything like that, or a Black Belt that you'd previously seen. So you kind of steal that space a little bit, and maybe this is more of a nod to the fact that there's Guardy players fearful of going Drifloon anyway, and potentially the fact that you have Briar in the deck regardless, that if they leave a late game single prizer, you can still Briar through it and take 2. So I think that's some nuance between the two. Also, weirdly enough, the Leaf doing the 100 heal can deny a lot of the Guardy math, and Verdant, if they're trying to set up multi-prize turns with monkeys, the Mossagate can block that, but also Verdant Storm, mentioned by a couple of the Flareon box players I faced, or I talked to throughout the weekend. The fact that Verdant Storm is actually online against Gardevoir a lot is kind of interesting. So I think low-key this was always better than the little Umbreon that we were trying for a little bit in Journey Together. Because actually, when they load up a big guy, Verdant Storm can be a nice option that still ends up taking out a Guardy. So that's something to bear in mind there, to be honest with you. So I think the Grav Mountain is a really nice soft answer to give you your own bump to Area 0, but also give you an easy means for Flareon to take those bigger knockouts even without much energy in play, or Boss plus Grav Mountain as a Jewel Seeker option to take a Carnelian KO. So I think the EV is ultimately really, really powerful and good list from Nathan, even if it is the main creativity being Leafeon, which everyone expected, but also the Grav Mountain being really smart, I think, overall. We end on Yurko with Raging Bolt. It's Raging Bolt, nothing too creative. It's playing a full 4 stadium though, so a small bit of respect being given to Watchtower and saying they want that 4th bump in the list. But beyond that, it's pretty cookie cutter. Still going back to Iono rather than Judge is a surprise to me, because I did feel like Judge Baby Bolt and Judge Fan Rotom were still great plays for the list. But it's, yeah, just pretty routine counts. It does have the E-switch in here to be a bit more aggressive with Baby Bolt as well. But it's Raging Bolt. We've seen this a lot, to be honest. Nothing too mind-blowing. Let's have a look at some of the other lists that stood out to me. This is a list that I've been playing a bunch online. Stefan with a really creative Draga Zoro. I believe Henry Brand, world champion, was also sort of creative in the thought process of this deck list. I've been testing it a lot ever since the tournament ended, and I saw... It's actually really funny, because I was playing Blaziken with a 2/2 Zoro EX and 1 Reshiram package for the NAIC. I had a really terrible performance, and we'll get to that later. But I was watching the stream with Stefan playing, looked up and saw that there was Dragapult with a 2/2 Zoro and a 1 Reshiram mini package, and my jaw kind of hit the floor going like, yeah, that's just my deck, but infinitely better, because it has a better attacker and better draw power, and just by playing PP up, you can still get the End Zoroark into the mix, but also PP up E-Switch gives you another means of getting a Dragapult powered up in 1 turn. So the fact that it's Sparkling Crystal plus PP E-Switch means you can chain Phantom Dive even against the Raging Bolts and even against the Golden Go, which is really, really exceptional. So actually, all of the highest placing Dragapults were Neo Uppers, or in this case, specifically, Crystal plus PP E-Switch gave you a lot of ways just to chain your Dragapult that little bit more. And also, E-Switch can work to just attack with a Zoro out of nowhere, or give you the option to Monkey twice as well. So it gave you a lot of control. Just these 2 cards coming into the deck list, actually kind of huge, because the PP up can make any of these basic energies come back into play for the E-Switch combination. I'm actually interested if there's ever worth more space being committed to this package going forward, because it did seem just like so dang flexible and powerful. But yeah, I think that was like really creative, and I was like, my goodness, why am I playing Blaziken when this is just like infinitely smarter, because your draw engine's better and your attacker is better. But really cool list. I've only just started playing around with this over the last couple of days. I think your bench management is really intriguing, and the double Turo helps out in that regard. But there hasn't been much I've been like wanting in the list, to be honest with you. I think the counts are all pretty reasonable. The 2 Ultra Ball is squeaky at times, but you have so much natural draw, and you do have the 1 Jacq in here, possibly being weighted over a 3rd Ultra Ball as like a concession being made in the list just to fit the extra draw power. But it means, like, as you evolve up through your pulse, and even if you're being denied your recon directives by the Grims or the Guardies or the Mirrors, you still have enough draw power from Zoroark. And again, you put your opponents, when you're on even prizes, in that really awkward spot of saying, okay, I've like taken a 1 prize this turn, I've gone back to even prizes. Now you have to find a way around the Zoroark, and, you know, a lot of players are playing like 3 or 2 boss and just a number of countercatcher. Obviously, some of the lists we've looked at today have had elevated counts, and that's a really good choice for the tournaments. But some players will just be caught dead when they have to punch this guy, and then suddenly Powerful Rage is busted. So I loved this mini package. It's similar to Dragazard as well, where you're trying to give yourself the type coverage to protect against Gardevoir. So again, it's a Pult list that has respect for Guardi. Let's see if Stefan actually faced and beat any Guardis. Did lose to 1, but did manage to take wins against 2 of them. So you can see how it sort of balances it out a little bit. The thing is, you're still limited in like how you attack with Zoroark, and it can be easily KO'd if you're up against a build of Drifloon. But even then, just taking a nice trade into a Gardevoir and putting their board position into a weird place where if they're not immediately candying up or have another Guardi prepared, they're somewhat in trouble. And you can like prepare your board aggressively with Phantom Dive Monkey to like try and punch their Curlies and Rolts and like force them to a board position of just 1 Gardevoir, and then suddenly Zoro can do stuff. So yeah, I think really creative, really smart list, and again, one that I'm looking forward to in future, because we're gaining a Air Balloon. An Air Balloon is just a strict upgrade to the rescue board in the list right now, because there's 2 retreat on Reshi, there's 2 retreat on the Zoroark as well, and I do think the Balloon is really good for this deck. And the mini Zoro package could be ended up inserted into so many more things going into Worlds, just because Zoro isn't that same liability on the bench than it used to be. Whether it's like Gust Itchy Pollen, or Gust Maractus or whatever, or just, you know, Panic Gust Iono and make them find a Turo, you know. These are all things that people could do in a panic against you. especially like Gardevoir players could be doing that. Obviously not in the Pult matchup, they're going to be doing other things, but just generally, these disruptive, bring up the Zoro, hope to avoid it for a turn with a snipe attack or whatever else, is far worse with Air Balloon in the meta. So I think generally that mini Zoro package is just getting so much better. Looking at the rest of the top 32, look how much Dragapult was littering the top tables. Really was busted for the tournament. Also a lot of Raging Bolt in there as well, to be fair. 2 or 3 more Raging Bolts in that top 32. There was another Grimmsnarl in top 32 as well. This is Tim. With the Pheasantipity as the big innovation and an elevated count of those nest balls. Just a small thing there, but it does give you flip the script, which is, no bad thing at all. There was a really interesting Ogerpon deck that made top 64 with the double Ogre's Mask that can jump between your 3 different Ogerpon, which is really creative. Using Teal Dance, obviously as a grass type coverage attacker, but getting surprise pumps out of nowhere. Kind of creative as well. Your discard synergy is the 3 Ultra 3 Vessel to try and get rid of these guys, and then you also have Cornerstone Stance, which can just insta-win certain matchups as well. The Surprise Legacy energy can be creative. You've got Clefairy for type coverage, you've got the E-Switch shenanigans, so you have type coverage with Clefairy and Teal, then you have Annoying ability, then you also have Pump as well. This feels like a Noctowl-less build of Terror Box in a way, where you just go squawking and trying to get turn 1 aggression. This is like somewhere between Terror Box and Toadscrawl, weirdly enough, in how it will try and play. Because this could very much be an I'll go second, I'll try and swing turn 1 with a Leaf Shower, initiate that prize race and put you on the clock. Of course, the high roll is that you get the turn 1 pump, but that's like such a big combo. But damn, that's really cool. Really cool list from Matthew. Let's see what they ended up losing to. They lost to a Guardi, tied a Guardi, tied another Guardi. So all of their Guardis are bad matchups, clearly. And that's a worry. And also tied a Grim. Okay. Beat a Grim and tied a Grim. But yeah, really interesting. So the Guardis were holding them back. Let's try and find some sort of Dark Attacker or something. Apart from that, there's no stopping Matthew. Pretty nutty deck, to be honest. Very creative to have a homebrew like that do so well. What else we got then? There was Grant with one of the highest placing Golden Go by the looks of things. Jishen has been playing this for a while. Has the Venture Bomb as a answer to Terra Peak, and also can just generally put the 2 counters onto a Pult or onto a Grim or onto a Guardi, so it's effectively like 1 less energy. And it also can trigger your own Adrenabrain as well, so it can do all sorts, honestly. As a 1 count, it seems like it's worthwhile. Beyond that, it's pretty much the same that we've seen previously with the Dengo Pults. There were more Zoroarks doing well in top 64 as well. A different list with Mochi Petch. Has the Picnic, has Janine's in here. That's a very unique build, very different to what we've seen. It's a 0 Darmanitan list as well, so just leaning into that Reshiram once again. Of course, having the damage mods help a little bit there. There was a Ho-Oh Armor Rouge in top 64 from Yehoshua. With a lot of the type coverage guys, the Durant in here has Hands for the 2 prize turn, has Wellspring for the 2 prize turn, has high damage output from Half Flame Mask, has Gigas for Terrors, Clefairy as well. Again, really interesting build. No doubt it's going to have some clunk to it, but the powerful attackers are still being yoinked, which is kind of cool. Also, there's the Monkey that you can attach a Luminous to, then fire it off anyway. Top 64, there was a Cynthia's Garchomp from Fabian. Again, really high-profile, strong player. So to see this choice, very interesting. When there wasn't much talk around Chomp, I think most people were putting this as a low-tier option. Playing the 4 power weights, though, to be really annoying for the Grims, really annoying for the Draggers that are trying to set up math. You just say, oh, lol, I'm massive. And also cash in on Spiritomb to just completely yeet stuff off the board. A couple monkeys in here with the Crispin as well, so you can try and get multiple threats powered up. The Crispin also helps you chain your 260 damage attack, which is buffed by Roserade. So you do have high damage output at your disposal. You got a couple Petrol in the list just to give yourself more access to item cards. So almost like 6 Arvens. Obviously Petrol's that little bit weaker, but it can get you Box, which still backdoors you into an Arven. So maybe Petrol is better than just playing Pokegear generally, because it works under Budgie Lock to just still get you going. And we know that TM Evo gets you into Kabite, which then gets you into Chomp, which then gets you drawing cards because of course Grew Dive anyway. So definitely getting into games, and Watchtower being the only protection against the Raging Bolt, which is still one of the weaker matchups, I think. Losing to, well, actually beating the Bolt, beating and tying a Bolt, I think that mostly comes down to just saying Watchtower and Pray. Beating a few Guardies as well. Interesting. Did lose a Guardie. But yeah, really interesting deck list. Chomp definitely back on the map, because also I believe Magda also played a similar list, if not the same list. So very good stuff there. There was a Walls in top 128. Nothing too much to write home about. Played Iron Leaves for an aggressive attacking line, which is kind of unique. Maybe just saying that, oh, I guess other things get around this too much. Let's have a Leaf KO option into something specific. But the 2 stage ones that we know about and the double corner, the leftovers. Come on, get a grip. Get a grip. Interesting to see double Watchtower in here as well. So Watchtower was showing up here and there. We're seeing it pop up. Ceruledge in 128 with the rev up. Again, a list that we've seen kind of before, but just keeping things simple, blending it away. There was a really interesting future box that made 256 actually, and it was a handsless future build, which is really surprising because you would think that hands is just the guy, right, that you lean into. But no, it has type coverage from Iron Leaves. It has Iron Valiant trying to ping stuff and attack. Also the Twin Shottles attack option within the deck as well. Kind of unique stuff going on here. Baby Miraidon still being pretty powerful. It does have a couple non-future mons in the Mew and the Fez. But you can see really leaning heavily into the Valiant ping stuff, right, with the 4-switch double Surfer and the full future booster, just to really get yeeting with those Tachyon bits, getting creative with that, and the double jet to boot as well. So trying to get things going, has the reboot pod for some energy acceleration. I'm sure people did not know what they were coming up against when they saw this. Lost to Ceruledge, lost to Dengo, lost to Grim, and lost to Flareon. So faced the smorgasbord. Beat some of the stuff it lost to as well, so just maybe a consistency issue. Christian D'Onofrio, 256 on the nose with Typhlosion Pidgeot. This is one that I'm really interested in, because this is one of the best Brave Bangle abusers in the next set as well. You can see there's already Defiance Band, that's an instant upgrade. There's already the double Grav Mountain and the Victini, so having another Arven searchable tool that can buff that Buddy Blast even further is going to be massive. So I think low-key people will be testing Typhlosion Full Worlds, and this may end up being the initial shell that people use, and then simply weave in the new Brave Bangle to push that damage output. Just outside of 256, a Brave Soldier took Blaziken Zoroark. So happy for them, spoke to them throughout the weekend, I believe, as well. And also came to the same conclusion I did, which was Box Watchtower, which is really cool. This is what I played for the tournament, actually, Box Watchtower within my Blaze Zoro. I didn't do well, but the list is actually really similar to what I played. I didn't play Turo, and I didn't play Devo, and I only played one Watchtower, but otherwise, like, really, really similar list. I played, like, third Poffin, I played one Rod, but yeah, like, really, really similar, and I'm happy that someone did quite well with this deck, because I do think it's ultimately probably a little weak in terms of power level, but I do think there's enough here for it to be a competitive archetype, and I think this is a pretty solid list to take and use if you want to. The losses were to Walls, which is really sad, Grim, losing to Joltik, which is normally okay. I did lose to a Joltik myself. It depends on the amount of Gravity Mountain they play, ultimately, I think, and how easy they can find that card. I prized my Defiance Band, then got donked against Joltik. That's how I lost one, but I did beat the other one I faced. But yeah, I do think this is a balanced matchup, and you can see that you're beating a decent amount of the Draga and Guardi and that sort of thing, so there's something here. I'm telling you, there's something here. And again, the mini Zoro package, not that bad when you can add in Air Balloon. Oh, that's one of the things I played. I played Rescue Board. But Air Balloon is infinitely better because you've got 2 retreat on Big Blaze, Little Blaze, Reshi, and Zoro. So low-key, I think this deck gets a small upgrade. It's not much, but it's honest work. Yeah, very cool to see Blaze Zoro getting that day 2. And a pretty cool run from Vince there. Someone believed in the Zoro Blaze. It's cool to see that that had its time to shine. But that should just about do it. Anything else, you know, if you want to check out, there are more creative and crazy deck lists. They may not have done well, but they may still inspire you, because it's time to get back into the swing of things. A new season coming up as well. You can start jamming your cups and challenges in July, which is not too far away. And trust me, I'm going to be try-harding next season, so hopefully that is reflected in the content. More things to come, more tabletop as well, because Emily's moving in July, so we're going to have a lot of tabletop testing. But the World Championships is right along the way, and I'm actually casting the World Championships, so I still will be there despite having a terrible season. I'm just going to be behind the desk talking about the action and gaping my mouth at some great plays from some great players. Hope you enjoyed today's video. Let me know what you thought, and I'll see you tomorrow for another one. Cheers.